This is the Evergreen Empire.
Green grow the forests and fair flow the streams. The gentle deer grazes, the wild blossom gleams. From ocean wave raging to mountain serene, all nature's proclaiming our land's evergreen.
Welcome to Columbia Conversations. I'm Feliks Banel, editor of Columbia Magazine for the Washington State Historical Society. On this episode, we speak with author Amber Casali about her new publication, Hiking Washington's Fire Lookouts, from Mountaineers Books. It's a how-to guide to our state's historic forest fire lookouts, and it even includes some fire lookout camping etiquette.
It does really vary. I've gotten to places by early afternoon, and someone was already planning to stay there that night. And I've also been places where there wasn't anyone. It just really depends.
Amber Casali was born in Seattle, and she works in marketing as a writer and editor. And she's also a pretty dedicated hiker and mountaineer. I spoke with Amber Casali by phone from her home in Seattle. Amber Casali is joining us. She's the author of Hiking Washington's Fire Lookouts, which came out earlier this year from Mountaineers Books. My question right off the bat, because I love fire lookouts, I love Northwest history, and there's something about, I don't know whether it's like railroad trains or lighthouses. Why do you think people are attracted to fire lookouts?
Yeah, I think that it is the juxtaposition of this cabin, this cozy place on top of a mountain where a person lives for a short period of the year, kind of combined with the wilderness setting and the grueling hike to get there. It's just such a unique setting of the man-made structure and purpose within the wilderness.
Yeah, and I've never been hiking and stumbled across one of these things, but I imagine that must happen sometimes. But how did you decide to write this book, or how did the book come together?
Yeah, I had been to a handful. Excuse me, I'd been to a handful of lookouts in Washington, and just really loved them. They just really struck me as special places. And I was an avid hiker and a professional writer, and I happened to meet the editor-in-chief of the Mountaineers Books, and it had been in the back of my mind. I had noticed there was no book that covered hiking to Washington's fire lookouts, and I'd recently gotten a hiking hot springs book, and so I thought, that would be really neat if that book existed. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm an avid hiker and a writer. I should write that book. So it kind of just all came together.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful book. Did you take a lot of the photographs in there as well?
I did. I took all the photos.
Wow, that's great stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun. And I did about half of the hikes on my own and about half with friends and family. So just logistically, it made sense that I'd take photos while I was out there.
Yeah. And in terms of, this might be a dumb question, but why do we have so many fire lookouts in the Northwest?
Yeah. Well, we are in a fire-prone area, and so we do have a lot in Washington, also in Idaho and Montana. So at the time, in the early part of the century, as it was clear we were having some very catastrophic fires. There was a huge fire in the Northwest in 1910, and I think it was just becoming more prominent on the national and regional radar that forest fires were going to have a big impact on the nearby human populations and structures, and that we needed a way to spot them as soon as possible and report them and try to minimize damage as much as possible.
Yeah, and it's amazing the number that I think, was it something like there were 600, or there were several more. At some point there were many more of these than currently exist now, right?
Exactly. I had read between 500 and 600, and then recently confirmed it was more around the high 600s, 680 something, I believe, just in Washington State. So yes, very popular and common at the height of their use.
And I know during World War II they were put into use for war purposes.
Yeah, that was definitely unique use, just for I believe just a year or two. So most of the ones that are still exist today were built in the early 30s. So 10 years later, when the U.S. entered World War II, they were used briefly as part of the aircraft warning service. So Instead of just staffing them in the fire season to watch for fires, they were staffed actually year round. I think, I think it was just like 1942 to 43 or 44. So just for a year or two, year round to watch for enemy aircraft.
One of the things that in reading your book, the part that intrigued me, or one of the parts that intrigued me, was that there's several that you can reserve in advance to actually camp in or sleep in overnight if you're on a hike. But then there's many that are sort of first come, first served. And I was wondering, how early in the day do you have to get there to stake it out? And how do you know that it's staked out once? It seems like there might be potential awkwardness out in the woods if you come up against one of these that you want to stay in and somebody's already there or someone gets there just after you.
Yes, absolutely. This is a really good question. So yeah, right now there are only two that I covered in the book that are available for rental in advance through recreation.gov. And that way, you put it online, you get the, a key or a code from the ranger station, that is yours for the night. And then a handful that are available on first come, first served basis. It's a little bit of, there's a little bit of nuance to the culture around it, I'd say. And it does vary a little bit by lookout. So for example, there are ones that are just extremely popular. Somewhere like Mount Pilchuck, you do have people stay overnight, and that one is just a few miles hike in. It's pretty close to Seattle. That one will always, there's no sense of first come, first serve. Whoever shows up there, I've seen 8 people up there from different parties sleeping at a time.
Oh, wow. There's enough room for 8 people to sleep inside and not like get each other's way?
That'd be including outside on the catwalk. So
okay.
I've seen most of them that are available for overnight, they do have a bed platform that you could put some have a mattress, some don't. You could bring your sleeping bag and sleeping pad. Mount Pilchuck does not have a bed platform, but I've seen hammocks strung up in there, and then people kind of sleeping around the catwalk, especially during, the meteor shower season. And so ones like that, in addition, Hidden Lake Lookout, which is also very popular. Those ones, it's more likely that you will be encountering other people as well. Mm-hmm. And then apart from that, I think there is a sort of, I personally think that there's kind of should be an adherence to that idea of first come, first serve. And so like you're asking, how do you know? Often as you're going up to a lookout, and people are coming down and they see that you have, an overnight backpack instead of a day pack, they might say, hey, there's already 2 people in the lookout planning to stay overnight, because they got there and they chatted. So you do often on your way up have a sense of if there's already people there or not. Mm-hmm. And it does really vary. I've been, I've gotten to places by early afternoon and someone was already a lookout for the, planning to stay there that night. And I've also been places where there wasn't anyone. It just really depends. Huh. And so my advice is to not go expecting to stay overnight. So for example, like I will always bring a tent, and if a bear canister is required in that area, I'll bring a bear canister, in case I'm not going to be sleeping in the lookout for the night. So I think just sort of being prepared, but for anything that might happen, and then letting it be a pleasant surprise if you do stay overnight, then kind of works out for everybody. That said, some people are okay with, bunking with, with multiple parties in there. And some people do ask, they arrive and say, hey, can I join you guys? And that's sort of a personal style approach.
Only in the Northwest would there have to be a fire lookout etiquette code for camping out in a historic fire lookout. I mean, what I love about your book is how it highlights these places you can actually hike to and see. Because so much history is abstract, or it's old black and white photographs in a book or online or something, or a podcast like this. But the fact you can actually, just march up and down a trail and find places where these lookouts are still there and they represent these great eras of local history is really cool. Now, the history in your book is great for the individual lookouts and the general story you tell in the beginning. Do some of these lookouts actually even have like interpretive panels or more information once you get there? Is there history you can learn from actually visiting the individual sites?
They sure do, yeah. And it really does vary by lookout. So, some won't have any, but some have just incredible background information. I remember at a Burley lookout in the South Cascades had, kind of information packets with photos and, data about when the structure had last been restored and who was involved. Mount Piltdown has wonderful, plaques and, will show what surrounding peaks you're looking at and timelines. So all sorts of, different displays. Slate Peak in the North Cascades also has kind of outside of the building. You can't actually go in the structure, but it has really neat plaques showing like the horizon around there. So yeah, a really nice mix of a different amount of information. And for the ones that are maintained by citizen groups or by volunteers, there's often information inside about who to contact in case you want to get involved or be part of a work party or a website you can visit. So yeah, definitely valuable information inside.
And I was shocked to learn that there's actually some that are still staffed during the summer months by actual fire watchers.
Yeah, I believe that there are 6. Of the ones I covered in the book, which is 44, and that's basically the western half of Washington from Highway 97 west. So I don't want to speak for all of Washington, but of the ones that I visited, 6 were staffed, and some of those staffed by a very long time experienced lookout staff who have been doing it for 10 to 25 years, and then I also met a couple lookout staff that was their first summer doing it. So it runs the gamut, and everyone I met was just a wealth of knowledge, very happy to share their experience and their passion for fire lookouts, and and just hearing what their day-to-day experience is like you said, to know that the fire spotting was happening back in the early part of the century, but then to be able to correlate that with our own firsthand experience today, and especially being able to talk to someone who's still doing that is a really neat experience.
Yeah, and I think there was etiquette too about visiting during business hours and maybe bringing a present and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So especially in the early part of the century, food and your rations for the summer, it was very limited and very defined. Oftentimes, you might pack in everything that you need for the summer, on a pack mule and on your own back, and that was it for the summer. I mean, that was like, your food was very rationed. In some places that were a little more accessible, there might be, 1 or 2 or 3 resupplies throughout the summer. But if you're coming in for the weekend, for the day as a day hiker, it's really a wonderful gesture to bring the things that the lookout staff might be missing out there for months at a time. So fresh fruits and vegetables were very welcome. Any kind of treat, sweet treat. So it's just kind of a good, a good goodwill gesture for their service and their hard work out there. And so that carries over today. If you go to one that is staffed, always a nice gesture, and to remember that the staff, they're working any day that they're there. They're probably on the clock, because on the days they're off, they will often go out and leave the lookout. So they might be on for 5 days and off for 2 days. So if they're there, they're working. So I believe their working hours are 9:30 to 6, and so just keep in mind that they're on the clock, and this is their home for the summer.
And it sounds like when they recruit people to do this work that they understand that the big part of their job is this sort of interpretive role, being able to, talk to visitors and people, not just like shoo people away, but part of the job is kind of being an ambassador for, the organization or the whole what they're trying to get done. So it sounds like a great fit.
Absolutely.
And is there, I know some of the people listening to this would probably want to just be able to drive to a lookout and be able to walk a short distance. Is there any in your book that are sort of really super easy to get to for someone who doesn't think of themselves as much of a hiker?
Yes, absolutely. So I use the term hike somewhat loosely. So I defined hike as anything that you potentially could walk to. And so the shortest hike in the book is 2/3 of a mile. So it's actually just 1/3 of a mile each way.
Wow.
And these days, for a lot of the lookouts, there's a Forest Service road that goes all the way to the lookout, but there's a gate at some point along the road. And so sometimes that gate is open. So there are many that you can drive straight to, literally to the base of the lookout. But if it's the shoulder season, or if the staff person has their day off, or for whatever reason, that gate might be closed. And so for a lot of these hikes, I've started the description at the gate, assuming that you can't assume the gate will be open.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be doing a road walk that will range from 1/3 of a mile to maybe 2 miles. So some nice short walks, and some of them you can drive directly to. Some of them that I've described the hike option, for example, Mount Constitution on Orcas Island, is in Moran State Park, and there is a really nice trail you can take up there, or you can drive straight to the summit. So my goal was to provide as much information so that the reader could sort of make a decision about what kind of hike, walk, or drive they want to have.
Yeah, like the sort of cliche classic hike to the Jack Kerouac, Desolation Peak one. The way you describe the two options in the book there, that's a backpacking trip. That's like a mission. That's not just a kind of a day hike sort of thing.
Yeah, and that one is very remote. That is sort of one of the hardest to get to. I believe it's 46 miles round trip if you go completely by land. And I took 3 days, a 3-day backpacking trip for that one.
Wow.
Or you can go by boat a lot of the way on Ross Lake, but that does cost a bit, I believe.
Yeah.
Over $100 for that boat ride. So either way, it's a haul to get there, but really, really worth it.
It's amazing how much that, the fact that Jack Kerouac spent that summer there back in the 1950s and wrote about it in a couple different books that he published. I feel like that one particular summer and that one particular guy is responsible for these lookouts still kind of capturing people's imaginations, so much 50, 60 years later. It's pretty amazing. Was that one worth the hike to see the Jack Kerouac one?
Absolutely. I'm partial to the North Cascades. It's a really stunning view with the Ross Lake right below. So, and you're right by the Canadian border, and that one actually is one of the ones that's still staffed. And I've been to that one twice, and unfortunately missed the lookout staff both times. But also a wonderful experience if you get to chat with that staff. So I think if for anyone who is up for making that kind of trek, absolutely worth it.
And now it's fall and winter's going to be here before we know it. I know there's probably some of these shelters or these lookouts are off limits in the winter season. Are there any that are accessible year round?
So a lot of them, if they're open to the public, they do remain open in the winter. The issue is just with going up, a steep slope. A lot of these are a bit of a haul to get there, a bit of a steep climb, even if it's just over a few miles. So it's really knowing avalanche danger in that area. And so, if there's one that, someone's interested in, I would say just, looking into the winter conditions on a case by case basis, but absolutely some of them are accessible in the wintertime.
Got it. Well, it's really nice talking to you. It's a wonderful book. It sounds like it would make a really great holiday present, and then look forward to a spring and summer next year of doing some hiking around and visiting some really cool historic locations in Washington. Amber Casali, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Amber Casali for speaking with me for this episode of Columbia Conversations from the Washington State Historical Society. Her new book, Hiking Washington's Fire Lookouts, is available from Mountaineers Books. For more information about Columbia Magazine or to subscribe, please visit washingtonhistory.org. I'm Feliks Banel.